In the dying light of a winter afternoon over Nazi Germany, the sky vibrated with the low, heavy hum of engines laboring through turbulent air. The fortress they called the B-17G, battered, scorched, and bleeding fuel, crawled across the sky like a wounded animal trying to outrun death. Inside the American bomber, the crew moved with the weary automatism of men who had spent hours drifting between terror and exhaustion. Their oxygen masks were frozen stiff, their gloves soaked in blood, and their voices barely rose above hoarse whispers. Frost clung to the windows. Shell holes stitched the fuselage. The tail section hung at an unnatural angle, as if held in place by stubbornness alone. This was the dying remnant of a shattered formation, limping home after a brutal raid on Bremen. And fate was about to place them in the crosshairs of one of the Luftwaffe's most formidable aces, Franz Stigler. Stigler had been scrambling all morning, leaping from briefings to readiness positions, the roar of engines and clipped officer commands filling the airfields like a constant pulse. He had fought too many sorties to remember them all, yet he felt every one in the ache of his bones and the thinness around his eyes. In 1943, the Luftwaffe was stretched thin, and its pilots bore the strain, the endless missions, the relentless American bombers, the growing fear that Germany's skies no longer belonged to Germany. But Stigler was still a deadly predator. With over 24 victories to his name, he flew with the calm, lethal precision of a man who had long ago made peace with danger. And today, he was climbing into his Messerschmitt Bf 109 G6, the aircraft he knew as intimately as his own hands. When the command tower reported a lone American bomber limping dangerously close to their sector, Stigler's instincts sharpened. A single B-17 trailing behind the others often meant easy prey, a straggler that could not keep up, a machine already softened by flak and gunfire, vulnerable to a finishing blow. There was no hesitation in his launch. His Messerschmitt sliced upward through the cloud deck, engines screaming with hunger for altitude. The sky grew darker, colder, a vast bruised canvas where contrails stretched like ghostly scars. As he leveled off, he saw it, a solitary shape staggering through the sky, dipping slightly to the left, losing altitude in ragged spurts. The fortress was still massive, a steel whale against the pallid backdrop, but its condition was visibly catastrophic. Smoke leaked from the No. 2 engine. The fuselage was torn open. The tail looked as though someone had taken a massive bite out of it. Even from a distance, Stigler could see the scars of combat, a plane that had endured hell and somehow refused to die. He advanced on it with calculated caution. A wounded bomber could be more dangerous than a healthy one. Cornered prey often lashed out viciously. As he closed to firing range, he raised his gun sight, ready to unleash the fire that had brought down so many American airmen before today. His finger rested lightly on the trigger. His breathing slowed. His heartbeat steadied. This was routine. This was war. This was what he had trained for. But then something unexpected happened. The bomber did not fire. No .50 caliber guns swiveled toward him. No angry tracers tore through the sky. The dorsal turret remained still. The nose gun did not even twitch. It was as if the fortress was unconscious, drifting in a daze, blind to the predator stalking it. Stigler frowned. That was impossible. American crews were disciplined, defensive, and fiercely protective of their aircraft. They rarely hesitated to fire. He edged closer. The sight that greeted him would stay with him for the rest of his life. The tail gunner's compartment was shredded beyond recognition. The guns bent and frozen in place, coated in blood and ice. The gunner himself was slumped forward, unmoving, a silent testament to the violence the plane had endured. The waist gunner positions were riddled with holes, their windows blown open to the freezing air. Inside, he could see crewmen working frantically on a wounded comrade, their faces pale, their oxygen masks cracking from frost. The radio operator lay on the floor, bleeding heavily.
The pilot and co-pilot sat rigidly in their seats, fighting the plane's mangled controls with every scrap of strength they had left.
This was not a bomber ready to fight. This was a bomber barely alive. And in that moment, Stigler hesitated. His training told him to fire. His duty told him to fire. His country demanded he fire. But something deeper, something older, stirred inside him. An instinct he had learned as a boy long before the world was consumed by war. His brother had once taught him that a warrior did not kill a defenseless opponent. That was not honor. That was not victory. That was murder. But honor alone could not explain what Stigler did next. He eased his finger off the trigger and pulled alongside the B-17, close enough to see directly into the cockpit. The American pilot, Lieutenant Charlie Brown, stared back at him with wide, exhausted eyes. There was no aggression in them, only shock, fear, and disbelief. Brown had never in his life been this close to a German fighter without seeing muzzle flashes. Stigler gestured with his hand, trying to signal Brown to land in Germany, to surrender, to stop before his crippled machine gave out. Brown looked at him, uncomprehending. He was delirious, half-frozen, concentrating solely on keeping the bomber level. So Stigler made a decision that violated every protocol, every order, every wartime expectation. He positioned his Bf-109 not as an attacker, but as an escort. Side by side, predator and prey, ace and wounded crew, German and American, flew together in an impossible formation. The bomber limped forward. The fighter glided silently beside it, matching its speed, shielding it from German flak crews who would otherwise shoot it down. Stigler even dipped his wings at one point, signaling the ground gunners below to hold their fire. The anti-aircraft batteries obeyed, confused but unwilling to shoot at a German ace. For several minutes, they drifted through the frozen sky in surreal companionship. Inside the bomber, disbelief turned into astonished recognition. The German fighter was not attacking, he was protecting them. Stigler knew that escorting the bomber too far would be suicide. American fighters would tear him apart the moment they spotted him. So as they neared the North Sea, he pulled closer to the cockpit one last time. He saluted, slow, deliberate, respectful. A gesture not of enemies, but of warriors acknowledging each other's humanity. Brown, barely conscious, returned the gesture. Then Stigler banked his Messerschmitt away, disappearing into the cloud layer, fading like a ghost into the gray horizon. The fortress continued crawling home, sustained by willpower more than machinery. Hours later, against all odds, Charlie Brown's crew landed in England, collapsing from exhaustion as medics swarmed the aircraft. When Brown filed his report, intelligence officers interrogated him relentlessly. No one believed him. A German ace who refused to kill them? A fighter who escorted them to safety? The stories sounded like madness, or perhaps a cover for unknown operational failures. The report was buried, the incident classified, and both men moved on with their war, carrying the memory in silence. For decades, Stigler told no one. Revealing the truth would have been dangerous. He could have been court-martialed, executed, or branded a traitor. His mercy had been a secret he kept locked away in the deepest part of his conscience. Brown, meanwhile, tried to find the mysterious German pilot, but every search turned cold. There were no records, no witnesses, no answers. Nearly 50 years passed. Then, in the early 1990s, Brown, now retired, gray-haired, and carrying the weight of time, tried one last time to find the man who spared him. He placed an ad in a German newsletter for fighter pilots, and at last, thousands of miles away, Stigler saw it. He immediately knew who Brown was. There could have only been one bomber that broken, one moment that strange, one flight where he had been the guardian of an enemy airplane. They spoke on the phone, then they met in person. Two old men, once enemies, now stood face to face. Their reunion was quiet, emotional, filled with the gravity of decades. They were no longer warriors in the sky. They were survivors sharing a memory no one else could understand. The bond formed on that deadly winter afternoon had outlived the war itself. They became close friends, meeting often, speaking at length about that day, sharing families, holidays, and stories. Stigler later said Brown was like the brother he had lost. Brown said Stigler saved not only his plane, but his faith in humanity. And when they both passed away, within months of each other, their families buried their ashes near one another. The wildest part of all? The story people often overlook. Long before sparing Brown, Stigler had once rammed a B-17 tail with his propeller during training and emergency maneuvers, a desperate tactic German pilots sometimes practiced to disable the enemy when ammunition ran dry. He had the skill, the audacity, and the combat instinct to do it. If Stigler had wanted Brown dead, he could have killed him with a single, practiced motion, shredding the B-17's tail with his spinning propeller. He had done it once before. He could have done it again in seconds. But on that day, he chose humanity instead. The fighter ace who once risked his own life to disable enemy planes with only his propeller became the guardian angel of a bomber he was supposed to destroy. And that is how a moment of mercy between two warriors in the cold skies of World War II became one of the most extraordinary true stories of the entire conflict. A story of honor, survival, and the fragile thread of humanity that sometimes endures even in the darkest chapters of war.